The arena lights dimmed momentarily before blazing back to life, illuminating what would become one of the most memorable nights in Indiana Fever history. When adversity strikes a basketball team, it usually reveals their true character. Tonight, the Fever would discover theirs in the most dramatic fashion possible. Picture a team stripped of its brightest star, gutted of its floor generals, and left to face the music with whoever remained standing. Most organizations would crumble under such pressure, but Indiana, they transformed catastrophe into opportunity, turning what should have been a death sentence into a resurrection story. The nightmare began weeks earlier when Caitlin Clark, the franchise cornerstone, went down with quad and groin injuries on July 15th. No timeline for return, no certainty about her condition, just an empty spot on the roster where their most dynamic player should have been. But the basketball gods weren't finished testing Indiana's resolve. Against Phoenix, disaster struck twice in a single evening. Sydney Colson crumpled to the court in the first quarter, her ACL snapping like a rubber band stretched beyond its limits. The medical staff didn't need x-rays to know her season was over. The way she grabbed her knee, the anguish written across her features, told the entire story in brutal clarity. Then came the fourth quarter punch to the gut. Arie McDonald, fighting through traffic, landed awkwardly and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The bone in her foot had fractured, ending not just her night, but her entire campaign. In the span of one game, Indiana lost 2 point guards, leaving them with a depth chart that resembled Swiss cheese. Coach Stephanie White stood in the locker room afterward, staring at a whiteboard that suddenly looked very empty. Her starting point guard was injured, her backup was done for the year, and her third option had just joined him on the sideline. In professional basketball, losing your floor general is like sailing without a compass. Losing all of them? That's navigating by faith alone. The trade deadline had passed. No cavalry was coming. What you see is what you get. And what Indiana saw was a roster forced to reinvent itself on the fly. Other teams in similar situations had folded like cheap tents. The Fever chose a different path. Chicago Sky entered the arena that night, sensing blood in the water. They had been winless against Indiana all season, a frustrating reality that gnawed at their confidence. But with the Fever decimated by injuries, this looked like their golden opportunity for revenge. The Sky had no idea they were walking into a buzzsaw. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It had been brewing beneath the surface all season long. This was a team that had been forged in fire, tested by circumstance, and bonded through shared struggle. When the lights got bright and the pressure mounted, they didn't scatter. They circled the wagons and fought. Lexie Hull embodied everything wrong with confidence in professional sports. For weeks, she had been trapped in her own mind, watching shot after shot bounce off the rim like pinballs. 2 for 25 from three-point range over 2 weeks. Her mother hadn't witnessed her daughter connect from deep since August 1st against Dallas. The slump had become psychological torture. Every missed shot added another brick to the wall she was building in her head. The hesitation crept in first, then the second guessing, then the complete paralysis that turns natural shooters into reluctant participants. Her teammates kept feeding her the ball, but Hull was swimming upstream against her own doubt. The low point came in Phoenix. 1 for 11 from the field, 0 for 8 from beyond the arc, just 2 points in an entire game. It was the kind of performance that breaks lesser players, the type that sends shooters into hiding for weeks. Hull's confidence had evaporated like water in the desert, but Kelsey Mitchell refused to let her teammate drown. After that Phoenix disaster, Mitchell pulled Hull aside for a conversation that would prove prophetic. Looking directly into her eyes, Mitchell delivered a message that cut through all the noise and doubt. She was still counting on Hull every single night. No matter what the scoreboard said, no matter how many shots clanged off the iron, Mitchell believed. That conversation planted a seed that would bloom against Chicago. Hull's first three-point attempt of the evening rose from her hands with perfect rotation, arced through the air, and dropped through the net with a satisfying swish. Caitlin Clark, watching from the bench in street clothes, leaped from her seat like she had just hit the shot herself. The dam burst. Hull's confidence came flooding back in waves. She started hunting her shots again, moving without the ball with purpose, making reads that had been clouded by self-doubt for weeks. 4 for 6 from three-point range, 17 points, and a plus 22 rating that told the story of a player reclaiming her identity in real time. But Hull's renaissance was just one thread in a larger tapestry being woven on the court. Kelsey Mitchell was about to attempt something that went against every instinct she had developed in 7 professional seasons. She was going to become a point guard. Mitchell had built her reputation as a pure scorer. Her DNA was programmed for buckets, not assists. She was the type of player who could light up scoreboards and torch defenses, but running an entire offense? That was uncharted territory. Every fiber of her basketball being screamed to shoot first and ask questions later. Coach White had mentioned that Mitchell occasionally initiated offense throughout the season, but running the show full-time was a completely different animal. It meant suppressing her scoring instincts to elevate her teammates. It meant seeing passes before shots, creating opportunities instead of hunting them. The adjustment was visible in those early possessions. Mitchell's body wanted to score, but her mind was learning to orchestrate. She started spotting angles she had never noticed before, threading passes through defensive gaps that materialized like magic. The scorer was becoming a conductor, and Chicago had no sheet music for this symphony. Mitchell's vision expanded in real time. She began seeing the court like a chessboard, moving pieces into position for maximum effectiveness. Every time Chicago's defense committed to stopping her shot, she punished them with a pass. When they sagged off to prevent her from creating for others, she buried jumpers that left defenders scrambling. The transformation was mesmerizing. Mitchell finished the night with a season-high 8 assists, proof that elite athletes don't just adapt to new roles, they master them. She had flipped her entire approach upside down, and somehow the Fever's offense looked more fluid than it had in weeks. Aaliyah Boston provided the steady heartbeat that kept everything in rhythm. While teammates were adjusting to new roles and responsibilities, Boston remained the constant. She controlled the paint like a chess grandmaster, positioning herself exactly where she needed to be on every possession. Her presence in the post gave everyone else the freedom to experiment and grow. Boston's consistency became the foundation upon which everyone else built their confidence. Hull knew she could take risks because Boston would clean up any misses. Mitchell could focus on playmaking because Boston would provide the reliable interior presence. Leadership doesn't always require speeches. Sometimes it just requires showing up and doing your job with quiet excellence. The chemistry that developed between these players couldn't be manufactured or taught. It emerged from shared adversity, mutual respect, and the understanding that everyone had to sacrifice individual glory for collective success. Hull had to fight through her shooting struggles. Mitchell had to suppress her scoring instincts. Boston had to anchor everything while her teammates figured out their new roles. Chicago Sky discovered they were facing a completely different animal than they expected. This wasn't a wounded team limping through the motions. This was a group that had been galvanized by hardship, united by circumstance, and motivated by the knowledge that no one was coming to save them. The Sky's game plan crumbled within minutes. They had prepared for the Indiana team they thought they knew, not the evolved version that took the court. Every defensive scheme seemed one step behind. Every offensive possession met resistance they hadn't anticipated. The hunters had become the hunted. By the third quarter, Chicago's body language revealed everything. Shoulders slumped, communication broke down, and the energy that had carried them into the building began to evaporate. Indiana wasn't just beating them, they were methodically dismantling them piece by piece. The Fever bench became a celebration in motion. Every made shot triggered an eruption of joy that rippled through the entire roster. Players who weren't even in the game were standing and cheering like they had just witnessed something magical, because they had. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about proving that teams are more than the sum of their parts. It was about demonstrating that character matters more than talent, that chemistry trumps individual ability, and that adversity can either break you or forge you into something stronger. Hull's final three-pointer of the evening felt like punctuation on a masterpiece. As the clock wound down and the outcome became inevitable, she caught a pass, set her feet, and launched one more shot that found nothing but net. The arena exploded, and Hull allowed herself a moment to absorb the adulation she had earned through weeks of struggle. The scoreboard read, Indiana 92, Chicago 71, but the numbers only told part of the story. This was about a team that refused to use injuries as excuses. It was about players stepping outside their comfort zones to serve the greater good. It was about proving that real teams are built on trust, sacrifice, and the willingness to fight for each other. Coach White's voice carried genuine emotion in the post-game interviews. She spoke about character, about resilience, about the kind of human beings she wanted representing her organization. This wasn't coach speak or empty platitudes. This was a woman who had just witnessed something special unfold before her eyes. The victory marked 4 straight wins over Chicago. But more importantly, it served as a declaration to the rest of the league. Indiana wasn't just surviving without their superstar. They were thriving, evolving, and building something that could be dangerous when fully healthy. The implications stretched far beyond one regular season game. When Caitlin Clark eventually returns, she'll be joining a group that has been battle-tested, refined by adversity, and bonded by shared struggle. This supporting cast is no longer just filling time until their star comes back. They've proven they can carry the load themselves. Hull's confidence has been restored through fire. Mitchell has discovered she can orchestrate an offense while still getting her shots. Boston has solidified her role as the team's emotional and physical anchor. The pieces are falling into place for something special. Other contenders around the league took notice of what happened in Indiana that night. A team missing its best player, and both point guards had just delivered a statement performance that echoed throughout the basketball world. The Fever aren't just planning for the present anymore. They're building towards something bigger. The beauty of what unfolded goes beyond X's and O's or individual statistics. It was about collective will, shared sacrifice, and the kind of chemistry that can't be coached or bought. Teams that discover this formula don't just make the playoffs, they make noise once they get there. Chicago left the building knowing they had been exposed by a team that probably shouldn't have been able to do what they just did. But that's exactly what made it so impressive. Indiana took every excuse away from themselves and then went out and executed like a championship-caliber squad. The celebration in the Fever locker room lasted long into the night. Players who had spent weeks grinding through individual struggles suddenly found themselves part of something larger. Hull's shooting slump was over. Mitchell had unlocked a new dimension to her game. Boston had proven she could anchor a winning formula. When the final buzzer sounded and the last fan had left the arena, the message was clear. The Indiana Fever had transformed themselves from victims of circumstance into agents of their own destiny. They had taken everything the basketball gods could throw at them and emerged stronger, more connected, and more dangerous than before. The foundation has been poured. The framework has been erected. Now, all that remains is for Caitlin Clark to return and add the finishing touches to what promises to be a special season. The Fever have proven they can win without her. Imagine what they can accomplish with her back in the fold. This was more than just another victory in the win column. This was the night Indiana discovered who they really are when everything is stripped away except heart, character, and the willingness to fight for each other. They passed that test with flying colors, and the rest of the league should take notice. The ripple effects of this performance will extend far beyond the immediate aftermath. Hull's shooting confidence has been restored through the most challenging circumstances possible. There's something to be said for a player who finds their rhythm not when everything is perfect, but when the pressure is at its highest and the team needs them most. Her 17 points weren't just numbers on a stat sheet. They represented weeks of mental battles, countless hours of extra shooting practice, and the faith of teammates who never stopped believing. Mitchell's evolution into a floor general represents perhaps the most significant development of the entire season. She didn't just accumulate 8 assists by accident. She systematically broke down her own basketball instincts and rebuilt them to serve a higher purpose. Every pass represented a small victory over her natural scoring impulses. Every hockey assist was proof that she had internalized a completely new way of thinking about the game. The psychological impact on the team cannot be overstated. When players see one of their own sacrifice personal glory for collective success, it creates a culture that becomes infectious. Mitchell's willingness to sublimate her individual achievements for team success sent a message that resonated throughout the entire roster. If their leading scorer could put the team first, everyone could. Boston's steady presence provided the foundation that allowed everyone else to take risks and grow. Her consistency in the paint meant Hull could focus on finding her shooting touch, without worrying about rebounding responsibilities. It meant Mitchell could gamble on passes, knowing that missed shots wouldn't necessarily result in fast breaks for the opposition. Leadership often manifests not through grand gestures, but through reliable excellence in the details. The defensive intensity that emerged throughout the game reflected a team that understood the stakes. Without their primary offensive weapon, they knew they couldn't afford to give Chicago easy baskets. Every possession became precious. Every stop was earned through collective effort and shared responsibility. They turned defense into offense through pure hustle and basketball intelligence. Coach White's decision to embrace the committee approach rather than panic about the point guard situation proved inspired. Rather than trying to force one player into an unfamiliar role, she allowed multiple players to contribute pieces of what they needed. Sophie Cunningham's ability to initiate offense in spurts, Boston's court vision from the post, Mitchell's newfound playmaking skills. The sum became greater than the parts. The bench production throughout the game provided depth that many teams can only dream about. Players who might not have seen significant minutes under normal circumstances stepped up when their numbers were called. They understood their roles, executed their assignments, and contributed to a victory that everyone could claim ownership of. This depth will prove invaluable as the season progresses and the playoffs approach. Chicago's struggles exposed the difference between teams that rely on talent alone and those that have built genuine chemistry. The Sky entered the game believing they were facing a vulnerable opponent, but they discovered instead that they were confronting a group that had been forged by adversity into something much more dangerous than their individual components might suggest. The crowd's energy throughout the evening reflected the special nature of what was unfolding. Fans who had watched their team struggle through injuries and setbacks suddenly witnessed a breakthrough performance that validated their loyalty. Every basket was celebrated not just as points on the scoreboard, but as evidence that this organization was heading in the right direction. The statistical achievements tell only part of the story. Hull's 4 three-pointers meant more than 12 points. They represented the end of a psychological battle that had threatened to undermine her entire season. Mitchell's 8 assists weren't just passes that led to baskets. They were proof that she had evolved as a player and embraced a leadership role that will serve the team throughout their championship pursuit. Boston's double-double continued a streak of consistency that has made her one of the most reliable players in the entire league. Game after game, she delivers the kind of steady production that allows coaches to build game plans with confidence. Her teammates know exactly what they're getting from her every night, and that reliability becomes the cornerstone upon which everything else is built. The implications for the remainder of the season are profound. This victory proved that Indiana can compete at the highest level even when circumstances are far from ideal. They've developed the kind of mental toughness that separates contenders from pretenders. When adversity strikes again, as it inevitably will, they now have evidence that they can overcome whatever challenges arise. Clark's eventual return will add another dimension to a team that has already proven its worth. Rather than rejoining a group that struggled in her absence, she'll be integrating with players who have grown, evolved, and discovered new aspects of their games. Hull will be a more confident shooter. Mitchell will be a more complete player. Boston will be an even steadier presence. The supporting cast will be stronger than when Clark left. The championship aspirations that seemed distant when injuries began mounting suddenly appear much more realistic. Teams that can win games like this, under these circumstances, with this level of adversity, are the kinds of teams that make deep playoff runs. They've learned how to win when everything isn't perfect, which is perhaps the most valuable lesson any team can learn. The culture that White has built within this organization was on full display throughout the evening. Players genuinely celebrating each other's success. Teammates encouraging each other through difficult moments. Veterans mentoring younger players. Stars sacrificing individual glory for collective achievement. This isn't something that can be faked or manufactured. It's the result of careful roster construction and leadership that prioritizes character alongside talent. The victory over Chicago represents more than just another win in the standings. It's proof of concept for an organization that believes championship teams are built on more than just individual talent. They require chemistry, character, resilience, and the willingness to fight for each other when circumstances become challenging. As the players celebrated in the locker room and fans filed out of the arena with smiles on their faces, the foundation for something special had been laid. The Indiana Fever had taken their biggest test of the season and passed with honors. They had proven to themselves, their fans, and the rest of the league that they are built for the long haul. The journey toward a championship is never linear. There will be more challenges, more setbacks, and more opportunities to grow. But on this night, against Chicago, with everything stacked against them, the Fever showed they have the heart, character, and talent necessary to achieve their ultimate goals. The rest of the league has been put on notice. Indiana is ready to compete with anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances.